Welcome back, everyone, to the weekly Armchair Kickoff podcast. We're on the Top of the League show today to chat normally all things Premier League, all things football, but we're going to have a very special episode today because on today of all days, Jadon Sancho finally signed with Manchester United. It's been 2 years in the making, but it finally happened. So to discuss that with me, as well as Man United's further transfer business, any contract talks, I'm joined by Rhys Russell, friend of the show as well. And we have the fantastic sports journalist to my right-hand side, Mr. Phil Byrne as well. Phil, how are you getting on today?
Oh, absolute pleasure, lads. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Let's have a look at the comments. Rudy says evening. Keen says evening. We've got Rach in the chat as well. Any questions you guys have throughout the show, just pop them in the comments. We'll get them answered as well. We're going to start quickly because I'm really interested in terms of yourself, Phil, in terms of what you do. I would say personally, you've got sort of what is a dream job. Being a sports journalist, it was something I hummed and hawed about, certainly coming out of high school, and then whether it was something I wanted to pursue. Obviously, you've interviewed past players, you've interviewed present players, you've interviewed the biggest player, arguably, at Manchester United just now as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But what made you want to sort of get into the sports journalism side, and how did you go about getting that sorted? Because obviously you've grown from somewhere to now be a very noticeable name, certainly to Man United fans.
Appreciate all the kind words, guys. To be honest, I don't call myself a journalist. I appreciate the kind words. I think I have too much respect for actual journalists. For me, I just like yourselves, lads, started with the love of football. This was a creative outlet for my love of football. Never intended to be anything other than just that, and sort of blagged my way a bit. I was lucky in a sense in the beginning when I started doing this podcast, weren't like they are now. Podcasts were still relatively new, and I was emailing United and all these top football clubs, spoofing. I was this big, massive person in America and had all these followers. But I didn't have any, and eventually, we just got interviews after interviews after interviews, and they just kept getting bigger and bigger. And we started to get noticed out here in the States. We started to get signed by big people out here. So we worked for NBC, we worked for ESPN, we worked for. We had our own radio show out here on Sirius XM for 4 years. So basically, did it on my own and developed contacts, worked really, really hard, developed relationships. And it's like any industry, guys. You develop relationships, and they're built on trust. And so, people give me content, people give me information, people give me information all the time that I can't use, and I don't use it. And it's just basically through trust and through hard work. And there's lots of people out there doing this, and lots of people do exceptional work, better than me. I'm not trying to compete with anyone else. I just do what I do. And, I'm not paid. I don't get a lot of money. I'm not supported by a lot of people. I do this all on my own through the love of what I do. And the payoff's been great for me because I have got access that I never imagined I would ever get.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's one interview I want to touch on. I had a little read of it earlier on. I hadn't actually seen it prior to today. You got to interview Bruno Fernandes, who's, I would say, maybe apart from Paul Pogba, the biggest name at Manchester United. Certainly over the last 18 months, he's been the superstar for us. Again, how did that come about, Phil? Was it just contact that was given to you, or was it something you were pursuing for a long time since he came over? Or? Basically,
I've been working with United for a long time. Started out with working with United promoting our US tours. So I've had relationships with people at the club for a long time. The previous communications director that was there before Charlie Brooks was a guy called Phil Townsend, who now works at UEFA. Yep. He's a very good friend of mine. I've known Phil for a long time. So just through developing relationships with the club and the people who would allocate these interviews, through that and through asking them, sometimes they ask me to do it. They asked me, was it last year after the Europa League final, by interviewing Solskjaer.
Yeah.
So I'm very privileged in that sense, in that they will reach out to me and ask me to do stuff. But obviously I have a lot of conversations with these people in private, and I don't share what is discussed, because that's the right thing to do. Yeah. I had dialogue, for example, for United last summer, over articles that I wrote they weren't too pleased about. but they let me publish small parts of it, of their response to me. I never broke their trust. I kept it because it's the right thing to do. And so, like I said, lads, it's just from developing relationships with people at the club, respecting those relationships, respecting that there's certain things you can and can't do, and getting interviews like this. Look, obviously, enormous privilege to be able to do it. But what I say to people like yourselves or anyone else doing this, don't chase those big interviews for popularity, because most of them are crap, right? Most of them are just cliched nonsense, really.
Yeah.
They're not going to get anything out of those interviews. But, you could interview David Beckham and Jonathan Greening. One will tell you something, the other one won't, but they both share the same dressing room. Right, so they're both in the same dressing room in 1990 European Cup final. So there's some of the best interviews, the best stories are not the big names. Don't get me wrong, lads, I love to do it. I'm very, very lucky, and some of the privileges that I get with this, these people will do stuff for my kids. They'll send shirts, they'll send messages. Everything is I'm very, very lucky, and I'm really grateful to United for what they do. Even though I have to say, United have never once. I write a lot of things and say a lot of things that United don't appreciate.
Yeah.
But they've never once came to me and said, if you do this, we won't do this, or you have to say this or say that. Now, they've said to me there's certain things we won't let you ask in interviews, and that's understandable. Yeah. But United have never ever said to me, if you say this, we won't give you this. And they've never punished me for anything that I've done. So I have to give them credit for that.
Absolutely, and like you said, it's got to be a two-way street. They
Yes.
obviously trust you as well, because you don't break this player trust. You don't sort of push the envelope at all. Really, you're just quite, as you say, you're quite happy to be in the position that you're in. Was it always the goal, Phil, when you started and you started to get these bigger interviews and things like that? Was it always the goal to be having a close working relationship with Manchester United, especially, or was it just if it happened, it happened? And
sort of like that, because I was quite cantankerous. I spent most of my formative United years on the internet at Red Issue.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And that was my parish, if you want. That's more or less what I was echoing their views and sentiments. Now it's going a wee bit mad right now with a lot of the COVID stuff on.
Yeah.
But what used to be a magnificent forum and some fantastic people on there. Pete Boyle was on there, Richard Kirk was on there, JP was on there.
Wow.
People that really understood the football club and understand what's going on inside the football club, and help me, help educate me. And I think that's something that's incumbent upon young people today. Like I understand that there's different generations have different predilections. My generation was different than the George Best generation and what we appreciated. I totally understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the things that I find frustrating is I wasn't old enough to see George Best play football.
Yeah.
In his pomp.
Mm-hmm.
But I recognised how much of a legend he was. For some reason, not saying you lads, but I'm saying lots of other young lads and lasses don't appreciate. I understand Solskjaer may not be certain people's cup of tea, but to not recognise that the guy's a club legend.
Yeah.
Why he's not the same as Jose Mourinho in terms of how he's being evaluated. It was ridiculous to me. Well, Kenny Dalglish was not the greatest Liverpool manager in his most recent tenure, but Liverpool fans respected his legend. And it just frustrates me sometimes that some United fans don't recognise that. Like, some want him to fail. I don't understand that. I've never wanted, personally, I don't care who United manager is, but if it is happened to be a legend like Solskjaer, yes, of course I want to be successful more than I want Mourinho to be successful. There's nostalgia to that. There's something that is a fairy tale. So for me, my goal really, lads, was never to develop a relationship. It was almost an adversarial relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I've known Ed Woodward for a long time. Well, not long, maybe about 5-6 years. And to be fair, he's been really good to me. And probably been disappointed by a lot of the things that I've said. A lot of which were not complimentary. But one of the things that I made clear to United from the outset is, look, I'm an old-fashioned United fan. Okay, mm-hmm. I'm not going to be someone that is going to be charitable towards the Glazers. They will never convince me that their ownership is in any way good for Manchester United.
Yeah.
And so I'm always going to be that person, but I'm always going to be straight. So I do draw a line. I don't go after people personally. I don't go after families. I think that is where I draw a line and say, look, I'm not going to. I don't agree with his house being attacked and stuff like that. I think that is unhelpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's unhelpful for the protest because there are people out there that want to obfuscate the reasons why we're having these protests and want to mischaracterize them. And it's best not to give those people ammunition. You know, when you start burning American flags, you start doing stupid stuff like that, and the message becomes diluted, and then people have it's easy for people to then discredit these protests and say they're nothing more than just a bunch of loutish football fans who are anti-American. And that's just not the case. You know, so that's why I always say, look, keep it on message, keep it a short message. Don't turn it into anti-Solskjaer protest. Don't turn it into anything else other than, because the message about the Glazers is a really good one. It's unjustifiable for them to do what they're doing, and it's only in their best interest. So, but I must say, through my relationship with you, being consistent and being honest, we've got a mutual respect for each other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you're spot on about, obviously, the protests and things like that, because the message that against the Glazers is something that there's multiple different clubs in this country, but in the country in general, that could learn from that and have that same feeling. Arsenal feel the exact same way. Tottenham feel the same way. And when that was my one issue with the protests earlier last year, I thought the first one was excellent. I thought it was done really, really well. It got all the right publicity. Everything was on the news. People were talking about it. And the second one that postponed the game, where people were breaking into the stadium, because they didn't just walk in, they kicked the door in and broke into their own football stadium and things like that. I thought that was very unhelpful in terms of a cause, because it made football fans look like hooligans, and it made Man United fans look like hooligans as well. And there's always going to be reasons. But
what I would say on that, Greg, is at its core, I support the protest. I support the message why they're protesting.
Yeah.
And it's very rare that you get a perfect protest. It's very rare that you get a significant amount of people and they all behave impeccably.
Yeah.
And I also understand that those who want to discredit them are not honest. Analysts anyway, or commentators. So they're always looking for a reason to discredit them. Anybody at this point who doesn't know why United fans are angry at the Glazers are either deliberately ignorant, right? Because there's no excuse for not knowing anymore. I mean, it's obvious why United fans are angry. So I do push back a wee bit on this. We're trying to win over people, you know, because it's been 15, 16 years. If you don't know why there's an issue with Glazers now, you never will. Yeah. So I don't think it's there to win people over, but I think it's important that those who want to discredit it, you don't give them that ammunition. And I do wish football fans would understand the collective interest for a moment and put their rivalries aside and realise that one of the things this pandemic showed was just how important football fans are to football clubs and their longevity, and how football fans are the only reason why executives are making millions, the only reason why transfer fees are through the roof, the only reason why football has any opulence whatsoever. And this idea that football needs more money. You know, football has a plenty of money, it just doesn't know how to manage its money. We'll just have another ceiling and another floor if we give them more money. But to me, I think football fans should come together and realize their collective interest and use their numbers to do what they do in Germany, to get better kickoff times, to get better ticket prices. And for me, lads, with the Glazers, one of the things that bothers me the most is they rob me of the ability to pass this on to my kids without having guilt, without buying football tops, United tops with them, without having guilt. I want them to have, bed covers, wallpaper, football, tops, everything. But every purchase I buy, I am wrecked with guilt because it does feel like I'm feeding something I'm a bit of a hypocrite on.
And that's the worst thing. And you go back to normally I'm full of chat, and Phil knows me because we've spoken once and we had a long chat once, but I've been sitting there listening in because there's every time it's always good points. And the one thing you mentioned there is regret and guilt. And I'm the same, where I'm a young fan. Obviously, when the Glazers took over in 2005, I was only 8 years old. So I didn't really know the full message of what they were about. But I was still you still see them, the Man United fans, just how angry. You've got FC United in Manchester. Those fans will never return. It says all real how important this football club is and to people. And the fact that there was diehard fans throughout their lives, they've decided they're just going to go and build their own club because it's effectively sold its soul to the devil. Pretty much sums it up really just how bad it is. And you spoke about good relationships and all that, and that's a good thing because it just shows there's a respect, even though you don't agree with the ownership, which frankly I don't think anyone does. but then you've got people who give us, Man United fans, harsh comments because, oh, we went protest against the Glazers, or why didn't we get them out? We're just using this because we're not winning league titles anymore. That's not the reason we're doing this. We've had these owners for 16 years, and they have been poisoned from day one, and it's just, it doesn't feel like a football club anymore, and it's like that life and essence is gone, and people think we're just using it as an excuse, but it's not. Like it's what our club means to us all. And
of course,
I think the way you said is guilt. I think the way you summed up as regret, you can't pass on to your kids without guilt, sums it up really. Like it hurts your very core.
Well, I think it also saddens me that what football fans need to become now, they become amateur accountants now. Used to be showed up for the love of your game, you'll be a football club, watch the game 90 minutes, follow the transfer news, the news from your club. Now you've got to be amateur accountants and know all these financial terms, everything, because football clubs are not businesses that happen to play football, and these imposters that do this are exactly what you get with the European Super League. This is exactly what, because they have no love for the essence of the game. To them, their objective is to take every potential revenue stream and maximize it, regardless of the damage it does to football, regardless of the damage it does long term, or the essence of the game, or the integrity of the game. And let's be honest, they're all at it. UEFA's at it. Everyone's at it, right? There are no good actors here. The real reason why UEFA and everyone else was upset is they all douched each other. They're all pissed off. They didn't think of it, and they didn't do it. And it's just a bunch of people around a table that none of whom care deeply about the love of the game. Hence the reason why we're getting the World Cup in Qatar, which again is indefensible. It was human rights record, everything else. It's a disgrace. But the Premier League were more concerned about television rights than human rights when it came to Newcastle being taken over by Saudis. So we know that people are not here to protect the love of the game. But I just want to make a quick clarification, because when I say have a good relationship with United, there's a massive difference between the owners and the people that work there. And this is really important. Right? Yes, I know there's some executives there that are making an enormous amount of money. I get that.
Absolutely.
Most people aren't. Right? Most people working at United are just honest, hard-working people that are making an honest wage like you and me. Right?
Absolutely.
So, coming at them whenever they're making maybe 35 grand a year and have a couple of kids, Tom is wrong, because it's not their fault, and they have no ability to change anything. I mean, we've all worked for companies, we've all been lower middle end staff. What ability do you have to change anything? I mean, if my company buys a bunch of iPhones, am I responsible for the fact that there's people committing suicide? Building iPhones. I mean, I just think that there comes a point where you have to say, look, not all the people at United, just because they work there, are Glazer stooges and should be attacked. Or
people that are just doing their job and they haven't got. There's some people doing a job, they just haven't got a clue what it represents. They're getting paid to do a job because everyone needs to make a living.
Well, the vast majority of them agree with you on privately, but they're just new people. This is where. Again, this is why protests need to be extremely well organised and led properly by people who don't let the message get diluted. Whereas once you start going after ordinary people that have had no dividend to the Glazer ownership themselves, they're not being fortunate because the Glazers own Manchester United, then you lose people. And to me, like the mess, what the Glazers have done at United is so egregious. It's so awful. You don't need to do all this other shit. Just focus exactly on what they've done and why they're cancer, not just for Manchester United, but football in general. I said this in 2005, that be careful what you wish for with other clubs, because they're a Trojan horse. Whatever the Glazers do and get away with, other people will follow suit. And sure enough, Liverpool fans at Hicks and Gillette shortly after on a leverage buyout. So this is, whatever happens at United is going to happen somewhere else. So look, the Glazer ownership is indefensible. Okay. Bottom line, and United know that, and so, but that being said, lads, I don't want to go from Glazer ownership to a Saudi ownership, because my entertainment does not trump someone's human rights.
I just want it to be the absolute best person, as the club's best interest and the fans' best interest. Even if it was a very rich Man United fan that actually understands what it means, not just about winning trophies and not about the club's youth academy that stemmed back to 1937. None of that. Just about what it means to us, like this very club, like everything. And if it was that, if someone like that came in and bought this club, honestly, it would be the best feeling. It may never happen, but I agree. I would rather something like that than something that is way too extreme.
It may never happen, you're right, but this is where we've had impotent legislation where this type of ownership never should have been allowed. And the fact that Burnley are going through a similar thing right now, and the FA are doing nothing, the Premier League do nothing, is just a disgrace.
Yeah, they're going to watch another club get taken over sort of by an American owner, and much more fans suffer for it. Speaking of fans, on a more lighter note, certainly over the last 2 weeks, where fans have been a lot more prevalent and where it's been great to see them back at football is the Euros. Like the Euros this week, especially threw up some fantastic ties. I'm going to ask each of the panel before we move on to talk about the big Manchester United news today. I'll come at Reece first. Reece, in terms of your football moment of the week, so something in football that sort of made you be appreciative of it being back on or on TV, and especially back with fans in the stadium.
There's quite a few things. I think just the aura of fans is probably the best thing, rather than just a moment. Because there's so many. I mean, you look at the fan bases of like the France-Switzerland game. It was a complete atmosphere for the whole 90 minutes. And the penalty shootout, it was great to watch. You had the atmosphere at Wembley for the England-Germany game, like the German fans, like the English fans. They were all showing the atmosphere of what this game means to each other. So you've got that. But for me, I think just the aura of having fans again is probably just my overall moment, because it's hard to pick one. It is really hard to pick one.
Yeah, and football needed fans back. Like I don't think. Yeah. I was so happy when it came back, and the fact that it was on the TV and we got to watch Premier League football again, and they did so much hard work, the Premier League and everything, and the clubs and everything, to get that up and running and to get that on. But it needed fans back. Phil, what about yourself? What's your football moment of the week?
Rabio's mom. Switch our wagon, all right. Rabio's man. No, just I think the Euros has been a breath of fresh air. Normally we see these tournaments that are just overcoming negativity. I think some of it's fatigue. And we're just seeing these open games. One of the things that you see at these Euros is how important the striker is. Take a look at France. So they had to recall Benzema because they didn't have another striker really, and it was not top quality. Spain, Alvaro Morata does not get any of the games the last 20 years. Right? Germany, so they're playing Napoli down the middle. Right? Even Italy, Chirimola is a good striker, but he's not the quality of what you've seen in these teams in the past. This is the hardest position on the pitch to develop. And if you don't develop a top-class striker, you can't win. This is why I know teams are built from the back. I accept that, but not to be great to be the greatest, you have to have a world-class striker. And I think what excites me about United this season is that they're going to have, for me, my money, the best forward line since the Tevez, Rooney, Ronaldo, Berbatov. 4. This would be the best since then. There's goals. They're all young. Rashford. To look at that forward line, Rashford, Sancho, Greenwood, and players like that, and Cavani. I mean, Jesus Christ, that's really exciting.
We've had a brilliant Copa America so far as well.
Yeah. So I think the fact we've had an exciting Euros, and the fact that we've Jadon Sancho, they've got a big major piece of business done early, which is refreshing for United fans. There was a certain inevitability about it for me. I've been speaking to people involved in this for a while. When I was speaking to them last season, there was never that optimism that there was this season. And I put a tweet out about a week or two ago saying we expect United to agree this imminently, shortly, what I said. And that was based on the feedback I was getting. And there was always the confidence that this was going to get done, especially after the fan forums. There was no way United were going to allow that financial deal. And look, lads, you have to give them credit, because United are often criticised for caving in negotiations and paying paying the asking fee. They didn't. They held their guns. What I don't understand is German teams were always relatively shrewd, but what happened over the next year after last year was entirely predictable. I didn't see fans coming back into stadiums last summer, right? I mean, we were just pretty obvious this wasn't going to happen for at least a year, and we'd be in a buyer's market a year from now, and teams would have less money, valuations would go down. So Dortmund probably should have done this deal a year ago and would have got more than what they did. But for United, look, I want to see Sancho and Rashford not playing these Euros, but if they don't, it's great for United because especially Rashford needs a rest. Bruno's got a rest now. And so Pogba, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Pogba, because I think one of the things that's happened in this Euros is somebody, if United want 50, 60 million for him, they may have struggled to get that before the Euros. I think someone will find that money now.
Especially after the games he had, especially the goal against Switzerland. Like, there will be eyes on him now, and more so than ever. Yeah,
absolutely. No, and you've segued really well into the sort of the next topic. I want to talk about Jadon Sancho, because today it was finally confirmed. It was confirmed by Fabrizio. Was it this morning or was it last night? It was last night, wasn't it? It was confirmed by Fabrizio Romano. And then this morning, or this afternoon, sorry, Man United and Borussia Dortmund confirmed it themselves. Jadon Sancho will be a Manchester United player next season, with medicals and things to come as well after the Euros. For me, it is a massive step forward in terms of how Man United have done business. I was a bit, when the transitions happened in the club, middle of the season last season, where we brought in John Murtagh to be our director of football, and we brought in Darren Fletcher to be the technical director, there was a lot of grumblings from Man United fans saying it's just Woodward appointing his mates and nothing's going to change and nothing's going to happen. Well, something has changed, because we're being a lot more proactive. And okay, yeah, a lot of the legwork was done last season, but you still had to. Man United could have rested on their laurels and gone, "Oh, we've got that tied up. We can go and confirm that in the last week of August." But they didn't. They went out and they were aggressive, and it sounds like they're going to be aggressive again. But they want 2 or 3. Solskjaer certainly wants a centre back, with one massive target in mind. But I think it just shows that one move, regardless of who's come in, the fact that there's now just a structure in place for Man United in terms of how transfers are going to work. Because what it sounds like to me, and Phil, you'll be able to tell me if I'm wrong, because you'll know a lot more of the ins and outs of transfers, but what it sounds like to me is Ollie and his team identify a player that they want, and then they do the scouting and everything like that, see if he matches up. I don't know if Mike Phelan's still involved in terms of like him actually going out and watching the player still. I know that used to be a way they did it. And then it goes to John Murtagh and Woodward to sort of get the ball rolling in terms of speaking to clubs. Is that about right? Is that sort of how it goes? Or?
With United is the first thing they had to get right. You know, you hear a lot of talk about identity and everything else, but that's step from the top down. And one of the problems is that if you look up until pre-Solskjaer, there was no real thought behind who United were employing as managers, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at this is what is going to be a really interesting development. So I have no doubt that if someone else had hired Solskjaer, he may have been sacked during one of those bad runs. Maybe last year pre-Fernandes when United lost. But you had Woodward in a situation where he was extremely reluctant to admit he made a mistake, right? After the Mourinho situation and after the Van Gaal situation. So he stuck by him probably longer than what somebody else would. Well, now he's going to be out of the picture. Whoever comes in to replace Solskjaer is not going to have that same sense of loyalty towards Solskjaer. And I really think that if he gets the signings that he needs to get this summer, then it's reasonable to expect a title challenge from him. Mm-hmm. But Woodward sacked Van Gaal very quickly. Moyes very quickly because it wasn't his appointment. Yeah. I have no doubt that he had Van Gaal and Mourinho on the same pretense. They're a bit good, they'll do, without any real thought into what it's going to take for these people to be successful and support them properly. Yeah. And both of their tenures were almost identical in the sense that you can see where Woodward lost interest second season. Yep. And started to undermine him and not support him properly. And really their fate was sealed then. I mean, Mourinho was essentially sacked 6 months before he was that summer. When didn't back him that summer.
After giving him the contract.
Yeah.
After extending his contract.
Right. Which they should never have done, in my opinion.
Never should have done. And look, I was in America when they were at news tours, and Mourinho was extremely upset, angry, and felt lied to over the whole Alderweireld thing, where Spurs were telling Mourinho essentially that United were in for him. Woodward was telling Mourinho that he was. I honestly believe that Woodward probably told him he was without any serious intent of signing him, knowing that he was going to sack him anyway.
Yeah.
But didn't want to do it right away after giving him that contract. Waited 6 months, sacked him. So there was no identity. We're buying players all over the place. And if you looked at the teams, it was some players left over from that manager, and some players left over from the other manager, and some players left over from this manager. It was just a mess. Yeah. And then you'd see these players leave and being played in systems that they were actually bought to play in, and then you'd see them develop. Because United was always the same way. They'd play well for the first 2-3 months, a la Di Maria and players like that. Then once a decision set in and the systems were all over the place, and they weren't Mourinho or Di Maria was moved from the left and down the middle. Then their form suffered, and of course they recover it when they leave because they go to football clubs and use them properly.
Yeah.
Solskjaer coming in, now they have a consistent identity. Now they know this is why Lukaku was sold. And I know people criticizing it, but Lukaku had to be sold. And it was really obvious to me when Solskjaer committee was going to sell him because of the way they wanted him. Right? So this is the first time, and you can't argue that United's in a much better position today than what they were when Solskjaer took over. That is irrefutable. So now United are buying players with a consistent identity, where even if Solskjaer leaves, the manager that comes in behind Solskjaer will have an ideology similar to that. I think Gary Neville said that United should never adjust their ideology again to suit a manager. It must be the other way in reverse. But that requires someone picking a manager that understands what their strengths and weaknesses are. Mm-hmm. So I think for the first time, you've got a consistent identity from the top now. Under 18s, the under 18s teams playing exactly the way the first team is, and all the way up the under 23s, and so this is the first time I feel like United have got a consistent identity from the top all the way down, and there is synchronization between all levels of the football club, where they're all talking to each other, they're all working together, they're bringing in young players that will suit, so that they could take a young player. I mean, if you look at Bayern Munich, right? Yeah. I'll give an example. Bayern Munich under 12s will play the same way their first team will, because they can take a player almost surgically and put them into the first team, right? And that's a homogenized football club that works synchronized on all levels. Yeah. United got away from that. So I finally feel like there's consistency at the football club where they know what they're doing, they know the type of player they want, and I think you've seen that with recruitment, because really since the Harry Maguire summer, United have been getting signings right. Wan-Bissaka, he's still a good signing for me. I know he's got weaknesses in this game. We knew that before he signed. Harry Maguire, to me, is still a top defender. You go through, and even the players that were there, lads, Solskjaer's got the best of the players that were there. So I finally feel like there's a coherent strategy when it comes to recruitment and how you need to go about selecting. Stanford being a perfect example. In the previous seasons, United would have moved on someone else. They didn't. They waited. They said, okay, we'll wait a year if we have to. We'll get them next year. And they should be commended for that.
No, definitely. And Reece, coming to you, what's your thoughts in terms of the Sancho situation specifically? Were you one of these that was happy to wait a year? And obviously a lot of money's been saved, and I was one of the advocates for it. I said earlier on in the year that I think Man United standing their ground is a good thing because it sets the precedent that we're not going to fold to people anymore. Like we got our pants pulled down by Leicester for 80 million for Maguire. Maguire's great, but he's not an 80 million centre back, and he knows that, and everyone knows that. But I think Man United we're too good at setting a precedent that, like, if clubs just keep asking for that amount of money, they'll get that amount of money. And yeah, what's your sort of thoughts on the Sancho?
Yeah. Well, if you can remember, me and you spoke briefly yesterday, and I was sort of like 50-50 down the line, where I was like, I was happy that we've got him because it fixes a major hole in this team that stems back over 12 years since Ronaldo left for Real Madrid. But I also said the other half of me was I was absolutely bored to death of this saga because it went on so long. Yeah. But to be fair, I'm also kind of glad it kind of did as well, because it allowed certain players to develop and mature. It allowed Mason Greenwood to cement himself into the team, which, to be fair, is great for him. Yeah. It also allowed Jadon Sancho another year to develop as well as a player. Like, see how he can come back from, because this is a transfer he's always wanted. Yeah. And we saw it last year in the Bundesliga. A lot of people criticise the league, and that's fine because it's not the level of the Premier League, and that's completely true. But you look at how the opening 6 months were. He was out of form. He was awful. He was out of form. He had an injury problem. As soon as it hit January of this year. He got back into form. He got back into the Borussia Dortmund team. They changed the system. He was moved around positions because he was such a creative and dangerous threat. And there was no coincidence that Erling Haaland's form was dipping without Jadon Sancho. And as soon as he returned, he was a massive improvement on Haaland. So I think it's great that we have that quality of talent in our side who can improve Cavani in terms of getting him more goals. Like Cavani's probably going to get around 25 to 30 in the league this year. I honestly think he will. Greenwood's going to benefit from playing in the middle unless Sancho is not playing a particular game. Greenwood can fill in that position. It's not a problem. So I like the fact that we have not just depth, but we've got the strength and depth for someone to come in now, even though he's 20, 21. He goes straight to this team. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what position. We know he's good enough. And that gives us confidence as well as fans that we can just go, all right, we know our front three now. We've got backup in between it. Great. And I'm just glad it's someone of his level. And 72 million bargain. Steal.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm just so happy that, like you said, we've got that quality now. We've got that depth. But it shows the character of Sancho as well, because he was playing like he had like someone that had his head turned last year, as we said. But it shows it shows the quality of character that he's got, that he still wanted this move. He's still pushing for this move. And he got his head down in the last 6 months. Okay, yeah, he probably got to January and he was thinking, what have I got, 5 months left and then I'll get my move. And then, yeah, it just seemed to kick on. But I think it shows great quality of character for Sancho to still be like, I'm going to get this move. Like he wanted it. He worked hard and he got it, and he has got it. And now we get to watch him play. Like people are acting like he's signed and then that's everything done. Now we get to watch him play for 6 years. Like,
his last game as a Borussia Dortmund player, they won the DFB Pokal as well. So he walked out with a trophy. Yeah, it wasn't the league title. Borussia Dortmund were never going to win the league anyway. They weren't in that position, but the fact that he walked out with a trophy, it'll give him confidence that he's that young
as well. Strikes me as a real professional. He seems mature beyond his years, just sort of the way he's carried himself, because it was in the Athletic today as well that him and his team have carried themselves faultlessly
100%
throughout this scenario.
Yeah, lads, because he didn't throw the toys at our pram last season.
No.
And he was making promises. And I think that it also is commendable to United that they didn't make major mistakes, where they were able to keep him on side. And look, if you look at United's fixtures, you look at last season, you could argue that the start was extremely costly, right? United started properly. I know there was another period of patchy form too, but really the start was that Crystal Palace game. Never should have lost that game. Dropping stupid points against Sheffield United on there. They have a start of October. We have Everton, Leicester, Liverpool, Spurs, and City. Right.
That Everton game that we drew 3-3. That's where I think we lost the title. I've said that when it happened. That the way it happened.
So it's really important that I think City, if they especially go out and sign Grealish and Harry Kane, that United start strongly.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I don't understand, so I've said earlier, expecting Solskjaer to have a title challenge, but just because the United buy Sancho and they buy a couple of others does not mean that they should win the title. Remember, City are going to buy players too, right? Agreed. What it means is, in my opinion, that United have to be competitive. There's only one team can win the league next season. Liverpool expect to win it, United will expect to win it, City will expect to win it, Chelsea will expect to win it, they'll all spend big, only one team can win it. But if Solskjaer loses the league on the last day of the season on goal difference, that does not mean he's failed, in my opinion.
Absolutely not. It shows he's actually kept them going, because everyone knows like the depth in that City squad is terrifying.
Right, it's a class squad, and I think I read an article where in most of Europe's top 5 other leagues, United would have won the league. It certainly had the best away record in all top 5 European leagues all last season. So I think there's definitely progress being made, but accept that you can't be talking about the future forever as a United manager. And I think like one of the things that's it's really, really important when you have a weakness in a team that you can address it that summer. In the past, United have waited and waited and waited. The problem is when you wait, by the next summer, you've now got other problems to address too. Mm-hmm. And so the team's constantly evolving. Now all of a sudden you need a right back as well as a right winger. When last summer you only needed a right winger. Next summer you needed going to need a striker. So it's really, really important. They did not need a striker and a right winger next summer. It's only a striker. So I think that they'll also find a lot out about whether Mason Greenwood is capable of taking that number 9 shirt, and that's really what is important. In the past, you would have gambled and waited and seen, is he capable? Now you need to get to be able to make that decision with Cavani and the team and saying his replacement isn't good enough. We need to go out and sign somebody, rather than putting his replacement and giving that shirt to Mason Greenwood and then finding out halfway through the season that was a gamble that they shouldn't have taken. So I think that is the best to, when you want to transition from one player to the next. Let's say even Paul Pogba was going to leave this summer. And Van de Beek a year early and finding out, because what if we buy Van de Beek this summer, expect him to replace Paul Pogba and find out what we already know. So now we know maybe we need another midfielder because Van de Beek's not up to it. I still think there's a player in Van de Beek and I don't want to see him go. But this is one of the benefits of doing this early and why it is really important you address the needs. I still think you need a right back. And obviously Trippier is someone they're looking at, but although right now there's no chance with Bellingham asking so much money, I expect that will come down. But I still think United will sign probably right back, centre back, and possibly a midfielder.
Yeah, it's on those sort of positions. I'll come to you first, Reece. In terms of the set, we've always talked. I think this has been probably I think if you could pick a running theme out of the weekly armchair kickoff over the last 6 months, it would be sign a centre defensive midfielder for Man United. In terms of a holding midfielder, who would you like to see? Who do you think is likely to come through the door? Because I think what fans want, I think there's a lot of fans that are saying we need a centre defensive midfielder, but all the talk coming from Man United and certainly Solskjaer and just different journalists is that Man United are going to prioritise a centre back. And this is where I agree with Phil. Like, I completely trust Ollie's judgment and his team's judgment. He watches this team train every single day. He's with this team more than anyone in life. He knows if we need a centre back more than we need a CDM, who are we to tell him that we need a CDM more? Because there's quality players in that squad as well that are going to be like, we need a centre back. Like Paul Pogba and Bruno Fernandes they're not going to stand there with, as good as Lindelof has been at points, he can be inconsistent. They're not going to stand there and just be like, yeah, you just buy who you want. Like, that's not what happens. I imagine there's conversations that go on between top players and managers and like, get a centre back, get this. So in terms of a holding midfielder, who do you think is likely to come in from Man United's side, Reece?
I think there's a fairly few examples. I know a lot of like Man United fans want someone from the Premier League. Like, there's a few that want Declan Rice. There's a few that want Wilfred Ndidi. The rise of Phillips has been one for many Man United fans because he's played that position on his own at Leeds. He's played really well with Declan Rice for England. I think it's 950 minutes, without conceding a goal. So he has that. I'm not so sure. I mean, I think I look around Europe as well. There's a few that I would like if it was Manuel Locatelli, but he's going to end up at Juventus. Arsenal fans, keep dreaming. You're not going to sign a player like that. Juventus are a bigger club than you. Just saying, Juventus are a bigger club.
I agree.
So I don't see that happening. I think he'll end up staying in Italy because it's hard to get an Italian out of Serie A. Like, they just love the competitiveness of our league and their homeland, and rightfully so. Yeah. There's a few good players in the Bundesliga. There's Zakaria, there's Leimar. Me and you have spoken about Koopmeiners from Alkmaar. He's one that me and you personally like.
Yeah, I love it. I think he's brilliant.
I like someone like that, like a ball-playing midfielder, but he's also good in the defensive work. I'd like that. Even if it was someone under the radar. I mean, I went back and watched a few Getafe games last night, and that Arambari that was linked a few months ago. He's actually a decent player. I can't say enough of him, but in terms of what I've watched, he's good on the ball and he's solid and with a tackle. But I wouldn't mind if it was someone from the Premier League. I wouldn't mind if we get a Declan Rice, then so be it. Yeah. I've got no problem with that. My only thing is I want somebody that actually fits the role about what Solskjaer wants this team to be. Does he want it to be a destroyer like Ndidi, or does he want it to be someone that can pass the ball and start things out like what Carrick was for us up until he retired? I personally think Rice or Locatelli would be the best options, not a destroyer. I don't think that's what we want to be.
No, fair. What about yourself, Phil?
I think it's a really, really interesting subject. So I think if you look at those quarterfinals of the league up to the Euros, were very talented. Bruno gets dropped against Belgium. I think he gets dropped because in the Germany game they were wide open. And I think he was concerned about De Bruyne. So he plays Paulinho in the midfield because he wanted a defensive holding midfielder so they weren't so open, right? Yeah. And then you go to the France game and you look at the best and worst of Pogba. Best and worst of Pogba in the final third, brilliant. Then gives the ball away. And we've seen this so many times. We've seen Pogba when you try to play the defence. I remember against Southampton, not the 9-0 game, the one before that, right at the end of the season, gets caught in possession at the end of that box. And it happened numerous times.
Yeah.
And you would concede a goal. And I think when Solskjaer was looking at the likes of Thiago last season, I think he looked at that and felt we need a better player that has defensive capabilities but can also link technically with, because neither Matic or Fred is that player.
Yeah.
So if you looked at Pogba and Bruno, both their national managers showed that they have defensive frailties. If you're going to get the best out of Pogba, you have to have someone of a Kante level behind him that's going to come up for him defensively. It's going to allow him, and I'm sure you've all seen the clip of Darren Fletcher talking about Pogba in when he was in United's youth team under 20 teams, and that they all felt that his best position was at the top of his attacking play midfielder in the final third. And you were all too young, but I remember watching Pogba when he was playing for United's youth team back then, and his last season he was not great. He was actually quite poor, so people forget that. But I think we both accept that neither Pogba or Bruno Fernandes are going to give you anything defensively. That means what's in behind. Now you can see why Ollie often plays two in there, right? Yeah. So I think for Pogba plays on the left. So I think really, really important. You need to get a proper defensive midfielder. Fred's done well. What I want to say about Fred is going from a player that completely out of his depth to a player that could have a career in the Premier League, but not a world-class player.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, agreed.
That to go down the spine of any team, lads, that's where, we're talking about a centre-back, we're talking about defensive midfielder. We've said we've just addressed the striker position for another year. Those are two key signings. Who you play at centre-back and defensive midfield. Remember, there's still question marks about who the goalkeeper is. So that is right down the middle of United's team where there's question marks. That defensive midfield position has to be addressed, has to be, in many ways, that defensive midfield and centre-back position is as important as any other position on the pitch to get right. And one of the problems with that position, it's a dangerous position for young players. I mean, you see when Phil Jones came there, Ferguson didn't want to play him as a centre-back, didn't want to play as a defensive midfielder, he played him as a right-back. That's a position where you put a young player in, they can't make a mistake. That's why Declan Rice, I give him a lot of credit because it's a tough position. So I think that for United, they would probably want to get someone that knows the Premier League, that is the right age, which Calvin Phillips and Declan Rice are. I'm sure if West Ham are willing to do something on the Lingard swap deal, it would be all okay. But I think that unless United sell, and this is the other part we're not sure about, how good are United going to be selling players? They've never been great at it in the past.
No,
right?
Never.
I mean, with the exception of Lukaku, most of them I can't think where they got.
Yeah, I don't know how we got that for Lukaku.
That's always been a thing for me, is like where we're going to pull the rabbit out of the hat, like make a good signing.
Well, I hope you need to get those exits done quickly, because Solskjaer is going to have to settle on who his squad is relatively quickly. And I think he needs to have at least 3 of those. If he's going to do 4, he needs to have at least 3 of those 4 done by the time the season starts.
Yeah.
So I think Varane is someone they'd like, but Varane is someone that has options. Be their preference. I think if they can get him, they'd be all over it. But still, so much uncertainty with regards to who those other positions are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was saying last night that obviously there's been big rumours today that Man United and Varane are either they're close to an agreement or they're close to personal terms or whatever. There's different things you read all the time. But it looks like with Sergio Ramos, looks like he could be off to PSG. I feel like the 2 choices for Varane now are he comes to Man United or he stays at Real Madrid. And staying at Real Madrid seems to be so far off. But I would love him at Man United. I think he's the perfect partner for Harry Maguire. He's quick, he's good in the air, he's good in the ball even. He allows Maguire to go along to that other side where he's much more comfortable.
I've seen a few things today saying that if he wants to leave, he's got to hold talks with Ancelotti first, just to see what Ancelotti is going to do with him.
Yeah.
But also, Perez has also told him if he wants to go, then he will let him go as long as it's the right price, which is fine because that's generally what an owner or a president does.
Every year left on his contract, I believe.
And they need the money. They need the money. They want Mbappe. They need to sell players. And if a player like Varane is saying, "I'm going to leave for free next year," you get 50 million for him this year.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And 50 million for someone like Varane is a thing.
Seems to taste neither of Pogba.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just, I think with Sir Alex Ferguson, not Sir Alex Ferguson, sorry, I've completely had a mind blank. Mourinho, when Sanchez became available, he was talking about how the players that you were going to sign, he was never looking to sign a player of that. But when a player of that quality comes around, you make exceptions. Yes. And I've heard that thrown around by other managers and things as well, that you make exceptions when a player of that quality is available. When a player like Rafael Varane, World Cup winner, multiple-time Champions League winner,
yes,
is available for the money that he's available for, you make it happen. And that's what I want to see Man United do. I want to see them lay down this marker and be like, we're going to be the team that when your players are coming out to the end of the contract, it's not going to be the agent going, "Oh, Man United are interested." It's going to be Man United are on the phone, Man United are interested. You make a decision. And not be in a place where players can sort of just get a new contract, because that's why we're linked to everyone. Is because
look, we see how important Diaz was to City last week, right? So that is an indication. United needed a centre back last summer and should have signed one. Right? Mm-hmm. That was their priority for the longest time.
Agreed.
This is where they can't make the same mistake. No. And to me, there's no point in signing Jadon Sancho if you're not going to go out and send a top-class centre back. Like what? I mean, you only send Jadon Sancho if you're embracing this to try to win titles.
Yeah.
So why be parsimonious on the centre back and go get Jadon Sancho? You'd be better off just not sending Jadon Sancho, sending some other young prospect and saying, "Look, we've accepted. We're not going to win the league. We're accepted. We're Spurs. We'll have some good players. We'll have some couple of seasons here or there." But so for me, I think the protests will put enormous pressure on the Glazers to address this, because they felt the heat, and the sponsors and the reaction of sponsors, and it's not just. It's also about sending a message to the Bruno Fernandez's, to the players at the football clubs, and this is not a football club that you wanna leave. We have ambition, and I think it's important, to send a message to the players that they currently have, because they're sort of fortunate in a way that Barcelona and Real Madrid are going through what they're going through, because I could see them playing all sorts of games with Bruno Fernandes if that wasn't the case. So great opportunity for United to push on. They're one of the few clubs with money. Chelsea and City are going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah.
But to me, I think if United were to send Sancho, send Jadon Sancho, send Rafael Varane, Kieran Trippier, and to me, a good quality centre midfielder.
Yeah.
Even if City go out and spend whatever money they want in any player they want, to me, they're not going to be that much better than Rafael Varane. You can have 300 million, and you are not going to go out and send a centre back that's that much better than Rafael Varane.
Yeah.
And same with Jadon Sancho. So for me, I still think that you can still buy players below that couple of 150 million mark, whatever, and be successful, as Jurgen Klopp has shown.
Yeah. No, definitely. Evan asked an interesting question there. If Ramos and Varane do go to Real Madrid, are they able to hold their own? Obviously, they've signed Alaba. But Reece, what do you think? Do you think they hold their own there, or do you think they could be struggling? Are they one short?
I personally think they will be, and we all know the quality they've got. They've got Eder Militao, who's coming into his own for Brazil and Real Madrid. David Alaba is just the same as Rafael Varane. He's a serial winner. He won everything there is to win for Bayern Munich.
Yeah, but
I think there's a difference between playing for Bayern Munich and Real Madrid. Like everything you've achieved at Bayern Munich, the second you go to Real Madrid, doesn't matter who you are.
It's a drop in the ocean.
Exactly. It means nothing. Like as soon as you go to Real Madrid, in their eyes, you're playing for the greatest football club that ever existed. That's always been their mindset. Like anything you've won start from now. The pressure's on. They've done it with Ronaldo. They've done it with Zidane. It didn't matter what you achieved.
Mm-hmm.
You play for us now. You're playing for the white shirt of Real Madrid. You've got to stay off the mark. I think they will be, personally. I think they're 1 or 2 centre-backs short because Nacho isn't a good enough player to come in. I don't know if they're going to play Militao with Alaba as a back four. They're going to change it up. It's a bit risky. There's still some good centre-backs out there for them to go and sign, but I don't know. Like I think they'll fall. I think they'll fall short, but it won't be like a major drop. But it'll be like a drop that'll have people like thinking, "Oh God, what's going to happen?"
I agree. What about yourself, Phil? Do you think Real Madrid could be in bother, especially on the European front? They always impressed me in the Champions League, but they didn't do so this year. I always struggle to not back Real Madrid in the Champions League because of just how good they are. But they could struggle.
Even without this pandemic, like Real Madrid have been on a different trajectory with their signings for years. With Vinicius Junior, Reina type signings, they were abandoned that Galactico thing. Eden Hazard has been a disaster for them. Mm-hmm. That being said, one of the things I'll never understand, I often hear this from United fans, is Angel Di Maria didn't work out, so therefore we're not going to go out and send world-class players anymore because world-class players don't work out. Can you imagine Real Madrid saying we're not going to send Kylian Mbappe because Eden Hazard didn't work out? It's insane.
It's not one rule for all.
Yeah, I think they have money to be that Real Madrid anymore. So they're going to have to do things and not do that. Developing young players, they're going to have to. You go back to Carlos Queiroz when you talk about Galacticos and new team players, Zidane's and Pavons. To win European Cups and all that, it's very hard to do that because really the question that every football club, top club, has to ask themselves is: any position, say right back, do I have the best right back in world football? Right, that's available to me. Well, most of the time, the answer to that question is not going to come from your academy. Right? No. If you've got a young right back coming through, the probability that kid is the best you can do at right back is not high, right? Yeah. So this is why they don't make it. Not to say they're not good players and can't make it somewhere else, but if you're starting to fill your team with young players out of your academy because it's the best alternative, then inevitably you pay a consequence. You've seen this with United, where the Van Gaal's playing 5-6 youth team players, not because they earned the right to play and because they were the best option in that position, but because lack of a better option. When you turn into that, Real Madrid have a great name, but that's not enough to win your European Cups. Now, I mean, and if the rest of European football is doing that, when they start Bucharest and Red Star Belgrade and all that, they were doing it, then you could get away with it. But now you've got Man City, PSG, these other clubs that could buy whoever they want and collect all this talent. There's just a massive disadvantage, and I just don't think. I think Barcelona and Real Madrid together are going to have a rough period for a number of years because there's not the money to buy themselves out of this, and people that bail them out don't have the money either. So I just look at this and I think that part of the reason, of course, why they wanted this European Super League was exactly for these reasons, because the future projections are not healthy.
No, agreed. And I said before, last season, that I thought that Barcelona could have dug their way out of their hole by not having Messi re-sign his new contract, which I know that would be the hardest thing in the world for Barcelona fans to do. But in terms of the good of the club,
saves them 45 million a year.
It saves them so much money, and I know he's
their wage bill by 190 million or something.
Yeah, I think they need to cut Tottenham's wage bill off their wage bill. So how do you even get yourself into that financial hole? How the way that those two clubs operated for years is now caught up on them, and that's what a lot of clubs. I don't know if it'll come to catch Man City and PSG up. It's hard to tell. The way they're run, their owners, doesn't look like their money's drying up anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. This is the problem here with FFP, because FFP never attacked that. Had it done so, this never would have happened. The Real Madrid, Barcelona, and so clearly a competitive impediment for clubs with wealthy benefactors pushing the price up of players, right? Yeah. So big clubs didn't like that, right? They're used to having their way, and then all of a sudden these clubs come in, Man City, Chelsea, pushing a player that once cost 4 million, now cost 80, which is fine if you're an oligarch, but not if you're a shyster.
Yeah.
But I think so. So you had this competitive impediment that was put in place and deliberately did not attack that, and now you've got. So tell me who's in a bigger mess, and I'm not defending Man City, Chelsea, or anything, but it seems absurd to me that you could have FFP that doesn't attack that, which, as David Gill quite rightly said, is the road to ruin. Yet it impedes people from putting money into a football club. I don't want to see the type of City ownership either, right? But as a Man United fan, I have to accept that we have had the benefit of being one of the biggest clubs in the world. But that was money generated by our own success. It wasn't, given to us by a benefactor. But at the same time, I don't want to see a Real Madrid, Barcelona type either. I mean, they get lauded for their ownership, but they're about to go bankrupt. I mean, it's just absolutely disgraceful profligacy and the way they've managed their business. And to say the answer is we need more money. Listen, you got the Champions League because you said you needed more money, and then you got the Champions League in a format that you got it in because you said you needed more money. Giving them more money is the equivalent of giving a child, a fiver and instead of £2 in the shop, and to have fiscal responsibility. They're just going to spend buy more shite.
No, agreed. Agreed, and they're digging themselves, and Evan made a good point that Real Madrid going through the same phase United are going through since Fergie left, and that I don't think financially we've been in that situation, but certainly in terms of the club lacking vision and things like that. And as you said, Eden Hazard sort of went off the beaten track to get him compared to the sign in previous windows, and it does look like a mess in terms of Spanish football. Mm-hmm. Just to finish up, I want to ask both members of the panel. I'll start with you, Reese. It's quite a big question. I always ask this to Man United fans. How close do you think Manchester United are? So let's say we get Varane, but that's the only one. We don't know who we're going to get centre, defensive mid, or right back. But let's say Sancho and Varane are the two that we have just now. If that happens, if Varane happens, how close are Man United to winning a Premier League again? Because last year is unequivocally the best year we've had post Fergie in terms of the way we played was watchable for one. It was great football most weeks. And when we were ticking, like that second half against Spurs was champagne football. Like it was beautiful. Mm-hmm. It was Man United football. And we are getting closer. And my dad's not a Man United fan. In the side, he's a Sheffield Wednesday fan, actually. So he's actually having a worse financial time than
bigger than Sheffield United. So that's your dad.
But he always says, he said to me since Ollie came in, he'll be the man to win you the league. Mm. Because he knows what it means. So how close do you think Man United are, Reece, to finally breaking the hoodoo?
I reckon I'm going to be bold as fuck. I think we're winning. You know what? Actually, you know what? I'm going to be. You know what? I will generally say this, right? See, in terms of you get where we are, you get the signings right, you actually get things cemented properly during the preseason, getting the get-go within 2 years.
I like that.
Phil generally thought I was going to say within one. I had him on ropes.
Phil was waiting on next season, got the title parade booked.
I had him on Fed strings. I was like, got it.
You know what? I've always said that when you get to a season or summer where they only need fine-tuning and will need 2 or 3 players, right? Because 8 or 9 are settled, then I think that's where I feel like they're on the verge where they're close. And people always say Solskjaer doesn't know his best 11 or whatever. Most managers really only know their best 8 or 9. Right? Because every week you're playing against different opposition and different horses for courses. Sometimes you're playing against teams where you're not going to play in a counter-attack. You need a different type of player. You need different type of... So you pick a team that's suited best to win that game, right? I feel like United are finally in a position where you saw the consistency in the lineup last season, where in previous seasons there was constant change. This is what happens when you get mediocrity because nobody locks down the shirt, right? So you're constantly changing. Hoping you get somebody in that gets form and locks down the shirt. Mm-hmm. Players that are playing consistently well don't get dropped, right? Yeah. So I feel like we're finally now in a position where we know our best 8. Right? Yeah. I'm not sure about, but the back 4, we know what the best back 4 looks like. That's Shaw, Lindelof, Wan-Bissaka, and Harry Maguire. Now, whether that's a back 4 good enough to win the league, I'm probably saying it's 1 player off, right? Mm-hmm. We know what the best midfield looks like. according, so we're looking at Fred, McTominay, Bruno Fernandes, Pogba on the left, maybe Rashford, and Cavani with possibly Mason Greenwood, one of the other, give or take. So that's what I'm saying. So maybe 8 of those positions are locked down where we know what our best. We know Cavani's the best number 9 at the club, right?
Yeah.
And we know Rashford, Martial up for grabs, Greenwood up for grabs. Sancho will start in the right. So maybe now we're looking at what are the 2 player positions that we're not sure about. Goalkeeper, I don't know.
50-50, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't know who's gonna
Yeah.
succeed. You don't know whether to take the risk on Henderson, because if Henderson doesn't work, you've then got to spend 60 million to get a goalkeeper again.
Yeah.
So for me, the positions that I'm talking about that I'm not sure about, that I think United need to fix. Goalkeeper, it needs to be a clear number 1.
Yeah.
United need a better centre back to partner Maguire, right?
Definitely.
And possibly a better defensive midfielder. Like those are the 3 positions to me that I'm not sure about. But now those are 3 positions right down the middle of the team. So those are big positions. If you need to get those right this summer, then Solskjaer to me has a team that is
yeah.
On the grounds of you mentioned goalkeeper, and I think that's right. I mean, I know a few people that said they would be happy if De Gea and Henderson got sold if they'd actually went got Donnarumma on a free transfer. I know a few people that have said that. And I would take the lad. I would have done, but he's went and joined them lot. So there you go. But if
on the bench,
no, you'd be a guaranteed starter. If we end up getting a goalkeeper, if that was the case, who would you actually look at from that perspective?
Sorry, maybe you asked me a question.
Definitely, yeah. So
if they decided Henderson and De Gea weren't it, well, obviously De Gea's thought Henderson wasn't it. If they needed a goalie,
that's a really good question, because I mean, see, PSG paying a fortune for Donnarumma. Donnarumma's a decent keeper, but they're not many about. Milan have replaced him with Mike Mannion from Lille. There's not many obvious goalkeepers about.
it would have to be all black, and it would be a record.
Well, it's funny because I was talking to Franz Hoek, all black, but because he was at United when both De Gea and Henderson was a young kid. I was asking him about that, and he was saying, look, they both have the same weakness in many ways, in the sense that their kicking's not great, right? And the variable with the one question that De Gea's answered that Henderson hasn't really answered yet is, can he be Manchester United's number 1? And that it requires, that's a position that you have to be mentally really strong in.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get criticised. I mean, you see De Gea's first season, he was slaughtered. It took a lot for him to come back from that. I think we don't know if Henderson can handle that pressure. And if you get that goalkeeping position wrong, it's like a game of dominoes. The rest just fall.
Yeah,
so
look at Chelsea with Kepa.
That's and I just feel like in any job, when you demote somebody, it's very hard to motivate them. If I take you at your job and say, do you know what, we want you to stay, but we're going to demote you, and you're going to take a pay cut. Right? It's very hard for people to stay motivated. David De Gea, in some ways, is being demoted, and I just wonder, does De Gea look at himself now at 30 years of age and say, I want to do something else. I've been here a long time. I don't want to fight for this place anymore. I don't feel I should. I don't feel I should need to. Does he have a fight in him with Henderson, where Henderson still has a lot to prove? So I think there's a big question mark to be asked there. But if De Gea decides he doesn't, then he faces a difficult dilemma, because he's on a lot of money. So he's not going to leave United and get the same money. If he wants to sit on 300 grand a week and not play, then we're going to find an awful lot out about David De Gea. If David De Gea is not United's number 1, and is happy to sit on the bench, then we've just been told that David De Gea doesn't really care about being number 1, which means he's not going to put the pressure on Dean Henderson that's required. I would like to think if David De Gea is told he's not going to be number 1, he wants to leave, whether he gets that money or not. And I'm sure PSG spoke to him before Donnarumma, because they're basically paying Donnarumma what they're paying De Gea wages.
I agree.
So
he's got to get it right, doesn't he? And the reports were at the end of the season that Solskjaer wasn't sure and that he was going to give both the chance, but I feel like you can't do that. I feel like you've got to make the decision.
lads, goes back to what I was saying earlier about the mediocrity. You get rotation with mediocrity because no one likes them positions. Solskjaer's not sure because neither of them have convinced him.
And they've not been outstanding.
You haven't been there for. If you're not sure about De Gea, right? Let's put it like this. So Solskjaer's not sure.
Yeah.
Then he needs another goalkeeper because De Gea he shouldn't have any doubt about, right?
Yeah.
Because what is David De Gea going to do next season differently that he hasn't done every other season? So we're going to get the same De Gea next season that we always get. So that means he's made his mind up about De Gea. You know, Dean Henderson, maybe you could loan Dean Henderson out for another season, but I don't think he needed a ban a goalkeeper this season. They've got too many other positions that they need to address. And I think realistically, if there's still uncertainty next summer, then you're talking about a striker and a goalkeeper next summer. But again, guys, it's still down the middle of the team, and that's what concerns me is that those are still, you know.
It's why I always like Romero.
What's that?
It's why I always advocate for Sergio Romero to be given a chance as a first team goalkeeper. I know a lot of people think of him as just a cup goalkeeper, but there was times where he actually played as the first team goalkeeper in the league during the whole David De Gea fiasco like 5-6 years ago, and he actually showed that he's a good enough goalkeeper. But he's always been reliable when called upon. Now he's finally getting to move on after an unfortunate treatment. But there is a situation that has to be handled better for this year in terms of, is De Gea going to be number one or is it going to be Henderson? Because he's still a young lad as well. He's going to need to hope that they've got complete faith in him. Otherwise, if his head drops, it could be horrible for him, especially at a young age.
Yeah,
definitely. And I agree with Phil. I think the centre-back and the CDM, if that's sorted, I think Man United are as good as the other teams around them. They might not have the quality that City have in terms of being able to bring someone like Riyad Mahrez off the bench and things like that, but we're definitely getting closer. Good times will return to Old Trafford eventually. But yeah, that's it. That's going to be it. Everything for today's show. Sorry, Phil.
Thanks for having me, lads. Absolute pleasure.
No worries at all. I was going to say thanks very much for coming on, Phil. Thank you, Reece, for joining us as well.
Pleasure.
I'm going to shout out a couple of things. Coming up on Sunday, we have the first NBA podcast from Weekly Armchair as well. So make sure you join in if you're into basketball. If you're not into basketball, come listen to. I know myself is on it, Rach is on it, and Tim on it as well. I'm not sure who else is going to be kicking around, but we're going to talk all things basketball, all things NBA. Reece, you got anything you want to shout out?
Well, I still need to speak to Keane, but obviously I will be the new host of the London Lowdown podcast, so that's going to be fun talking about all the London clubs. I'm going to be completely biased. Obviously, I'm just kidding. There will be another pod that's coming out soon. I need to speak to Keane about as well. That's All Things Wrestling if you're into that. But naturally, not much else for me except just hit that like button, share, subscribe, and get the notifications on because there's a lot to come that you're going to enjoy.
It definitely is. And Phil, anything you want to shout out? Anything that people should go and read, go and listen to?
Make sure you're following these lads. All the best and beautiful. Only Scotland. Honestly, lads, love Scotland. I'm Irish.
Yeah, we love the Irish, even if they're living in the US.
We do.
It's funny because I've split in the Euros here. With American misses not out there going buck mad for Scotland. She does things were exactly the same. I've had her in Scotland, and the thing we fight about is she says you boys have the best accent over there. I don't know about that.
Absolutely do. We absolutely do. Tried and tested.
Love it, Scotch. Lovely people. And Celtic Cousins, folks, all the best. Thanks for having me on. Absolute pleasure. Take it easy, boys.
Perfect. Thank you very much, guys. Yeah, join us next week as well. We'll talk a little bit more. I'm keen to talk next week about Aston Villa because they, to me, are very exciting, especially coming up this season. They're making moves. It's going to be serious. So join us next week. We'll talk all things Premier League as well. But from me and Reece and from Phil, that's everything. Cheers. Bye-bye.